Welcome. My name is Daria Gear. I serve as the Executive Director of Watch CDC. We're so happy that you're joining us tonight to learn more about the COVID vaccine and how we can keep our communities safer. Tonight we have with us two of our staff, Genevieve Tavera, Community Organizer, and Brianna Polanco, who is our Campaign and Communications Coordinator. We're also very happy to have Father Michael with us here tonight from St. Mary's Church, a very important community partner. I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Leibowitz from the Infectious Disease Department at Newton Wellesley Hospital. Newton Wellesley Hospital has been a very important partner as well, especially during COVID. So we're so grateful for his coming with us today and sharing this important information. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Father Michael.
Thanks, Daria. I'm happy to be with you tonight in this conference. I have already been vaccinated myself, but I know that many people are still wonder about it. And so I think it'll be a helpful evening. We know that many people have suffered loss and we buried people throughout the past year. And we also know that with the vaccine, we've been able to have more people feel confident about coming to worship and to be in church and to gather together. So it's important for people to learn the benefits of the vaccine. I know for Catholics, there is some question of whether it's morally illicit. The simple question, without going into too much detail, is it is okay to get the vaccine. The Holy Father, Pope Francis, has received it, as well as Cardinal O'Malley. And so I thank you for letting me be part of this and listen to it. And I turn it over to the experts.
Great. Thanks so much, Father Michael. Next, I would like to introduce a very special guest, Dr. Matt Leibowitz from Newton Wellesley Hospital. Newton Wellesley has been a super important partner for us during the pandemic, and we're so happy to learn more tonight about the COVID vaccine.
Great. Thanks, Daria. I'm an infectious disease doctor at Newton Wellesley Hospital, and just going to share some information about the COVID-19 vaccine. So some people start by asking, what are vaccines? And when we've got diseases that are dangerous, like COVID-19, vaccines are a way to train the immune system to fight the virus even before you've encountered it. So just like measles or chickenpox or influenza, that we have a long history of using vaccines to prevent those diseases, vaccines are a powerful way to prevent serious infections before they happen. So the idea here, the benefits of the COVID-19 vaccine, is that it prevents you from getting sick from the illness COVID-19, which is a respiratory infection, can make serious trouble breathing, bad pneumonia, and it's definitely been responsible for hundreds of thousands of people dying in the United States and many more globally. So the combination of the vaccine plus the guidance that CDC has provided for preventing infection using masks and hand washing, these are the ways that we're slowly going to get back to a more normal life in the United States and globally. And the COVID-19 vaccines play a key role. So what vaccines do we have? So there are currently 3 vaccines that are available in the United States that have either been approved by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, and 2 that are currently under emergency use authorization. There's the Pfizer Pfizer vaccine that's now branded Comirnaty. There's a vaccine by Moderna that's similar to the Pfizer vaccine, Moderna being a local Boston-based company, and then the Janssen or Johnson & Johnson vaccine that's been used since very early in the time vaccines were available as well. So all these 3 vaccines, they're safe, they're very effective against preventing the prevention of serious illness or being admitted to the hospital, and very effective in preventing death from COVID-19. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are 2 doses that are given 3 or 4 weeks apart, and both doses are important. And the Johnson & Johnson, the J&J vaccine, is very easy because the current recommendation is a single dose provides good protection, making it a lot easier to administer. You just have to get 1 dose and you're done. So how do we know that these vaccines are safe? All vaccines and all medicines go through extensive testing, and vaccines go through more testing than other medications. So the way it starts is small groups of people receive the trial vaccine. Once it's found to be safe, then they give it to specific groups of patients to figure out how it's safe and effective in other risk groups like young people, older people, people with other underlying medical problems. And then the vaccine is used widely in large-scale clinical trials where it's given to tens of thousands of people at a time, tested for both safety and also for effectiveness. Oops. More back there. So the next stage, after all that data has been collected, the vaccines have been carefully studied over a period of time in tens of thousands of people. The CDC has a committee that's called the ACIP, or Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. They look at all that information to see if the vaccine is safe and to see how well it works. And then they give advice to the FDA about whether a vaccine should be approved. The FDA also looks over that information, and they decide whether to approve the vaccine. And only after all these steps are complete is the vaccine released for use. And with the situation with COVID-19, because the need was so urgent, there was the decision to approve these vaccines under emergency use so that they could get out there much more quickly than other vaccines have in the past. And people ask about that. So people wonder, well, if this went so quickly, how is it as safe as other vaccines? So the good thing here is that we had a big head start, and there were other factors that led to a faster approval. So one was that we already had good information about other related coronaviruses, similar to ones that caused COVID-19. So we weren't starting from scratch, we weren't starting from square one. There was a lot of good scientific information that was helping us figure out how to design a vaccine in advance. And there were a number of different top scientists with a lot of vaccine experience and new technologies that were ready to go right away. The other thing is that because the disease was not rare, there were a lot of cases of COVID-19, and there was a lot of interest in signing up to be a clinical trial participant. There was not a difficult time getting volunteers to get the vaccine for these studies. The other big part was that the US government invested a lot of money to support the work. So it was all ready to get up and running very quickly. And then as these safety and effectiveness studies were underway, the companies were confident enough that they had good products that they started manufacturing them right away. So at the time, all the information was together, the approval was in place, there were large supplies of vaccine to start use immediately. So all those factors led to a fast start and widespread distribution of these effective vaccines. So a common question that comes up about these vaccines is it possible to get COVID-19 from the vaccine? And the bottom line is no. The technology that's used in these vaccines is not a live virus of any kind. It can't cause COVID-19. So if you get the vaccine, there is no way that it can make you sick with the disease COVID-19. So the other question is, do the vaccines cause problems, or do they have side effects? So there have been some serious side effects noted in follow-up studies from the original clinical trials, but all of those kind of serious side effects are quite rare. And you could put that up against the likelihood that people who get COVID-19 are going to get seriously sick, be admitted to the hospital, go into respiratory failure, or even die from COVID-19. And people who get the vaccine are far more likely to avoid those serious complications of COVID-19 than they are to get one of the very rare serious side effects of any of the three available vaccines. But it is possible that people, and it's quite common that people do have some side effects, and those side effects are actually signs that the body is responding to something, that the immune system has recognized that it's been challenged with something and needs to make a response. And usually those kind of side effects are fairly mild. People sometimes have a day or so of tiredness, headaches, some pain at the injection site, sometimes even chills or fever. But most of the time, those side effects are short-lived. They last for about a day or so. And then by the next day, people are able to go about their usual activities, work, take care of their children. It's overall as tolerated as most of the other vaccines we use in routine medical prevention. So the question that comes up sometimes is if you have allergies, should you get this kind of vaccine? And if people have had any kind of allergies to components of the vaccine, parts of the vaccine themselves, ingredients that are included, and that would be serious kind of allergic reactions called anaphylaxis, that you shouldn't get these vaccines, or you should consult with a medical professional or an allergist before you might get the vaccine. But the most common kind of things that people are allergic to are not included in these vaccines. So things like eggs, gelatin, basic preservatives, latex, those things are not included in these vaccines. And the FDA has a website that you can find that lists all the components of these vaccines to check the ingredients and make sure that there's nothing that you're allergic to. If you have other kinds of common things that you're allergic to, things like peanuts, you could always discuss that with a healthcare professional before you get the vaccine. But these kind of allergic reactions, serious allergic reactions, are rare. So another question that comes up sometimes is if you've had, if you're wanting to have a baby, is it safe to get this vaccine? And this question comes up because there's been a lot of information on the internet where people have made statements about fertility and the ability to have children if you've had the COVID-19 vaccine. And the bottom line is that there's really no evidence that the vaccine has any impact on fertility or your ability to get pregnant if you're a woman, or bear children if you're a man. That the antibodies that are made by the vaccine, the immune response, don't cause any problems that interfere with pregnancy. And then the other question that comes up that's related is, if you are pregnant, or for example, if you're breastfeeding after pregnancy, is it safe to get the vaccine? And the definite answer here is yes, that both the CDC and the National Organization, Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they recommend COVID-19 vaccine for all pregnant women, all breastfeeding mothers. And it's been clearly demonstrated that the benefits of the vaccine outweigh any known risks or any possible risks that might be associated with getting the vaccine in pregnancy. And we've definitely seen many patients at Wellesley who did not get the vaccine, who were pregnant, who came in, and some of them were quite sick. And although we have not experienced sad stories like pregnancy loss, there have been a lot of cases in the news over the past few months where pregnant women did not get the vaccine, they got COVID-19, and they lost their babies. So it's pretty clear that vaccines are safe in pregnancy, and they can help you to have a safe and healthy pregnancy so you can have a child. And of course, this is always a personal kind of question. And if you need to, talking to a healthcare professional that you know is often best. So adults have been getting these vaccines. A question that often comes up is, are these vaccines safe for children? So the Pfizer vaccine that has full approval for people older than age 16, it's authorized under the emergency use for children 12 years and older. And there's data that's been submitted to the FDA recently that they're hoping to get a full authorization for children 5 years and older very soon. The Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines are authorized for people 18 and older. And there's also information that's been submitted to get authorization for those vaccines for children. But it's pretty clear that, that these age cutoffs right now are the limits that are in place through the FDA. So another question that comes up sometimes is, will these COVID-19 vaccines change my DNA or change my genetic material in any way? And there is no way that these vaccines, even though they're made up of genetic material, they can't change your own DNA. These vaccines teach your immune system how to fight the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And to do that, it needs to get into the cell. But there's no mixture of the RNA that's in these vaccines or the viral vector DNA that's in the J&J vaccine. There's no mixing of these genetic materials with your own, and these RNAs and DNA don't stay in your body. Once they've done their job to train the immune system how to fight COVID-19, they're degraded and disappear over a matter of a few days. So there's no long-term effect on your genetic material. It's safe from that standpoint. A question that's also asked, since we've seen these different variants pop up over time, people ask the question, will the vaccines work against COVID-19 variants? And this has been carefully studied, and over time, it's normal for viruses to change. The flu virus, influenza, changes every year, and a new flu vaccine is developed every year to respond to those changes. We're still learning a lot about COVID-19, But the evidence so far is that the latest serious variant of COVID-19, the Delta variant, is effectively prevented by the current vaccines. So they've been effective throughout the pandemic so far. We're hopeful that they'll continue to be effective. If the virus changes in some way to require a new vaccine, there's active development of new vaccines to meet that need in the future. Questions come up also about booster shots. There has just been messaging recently about booster shots for people who got the Pfizer vaccine initially. So people who are older than 65, people who have certain serious medical illnesses are candidates to get the booster. People with serious immune system problems can get extra doses of the Moderna vaccine as well, which is technically a little different than a booster. And there's a website, mass.gov/boostercheck, where you can find out if you're eligible for a booster once you've gotten the Pfizer vaccine. And there's information that's pending about whether patients who got the Moderna and J&J vaccines will also need boosters in the future. This is under active study, and there'll be more information to come. But rather than worrying about boosters, for people who have not had their first vaccines yet, the most important thing you can do is to get your first vaccine doses to protect yourself from getting sick. And there'll be more information about boosters later. The good thing is that you don't need any kind of ID or health insurance to get these vaccines. There's no checks for immigration status as well. There are ways through community vaccination clinics like the Watch CDC program that will have information for you of getting a vaccine, no matter what your status is, to keep you safe from COVID-19. So there are ways, I know you'll get some information soon from the good people here at Watch CDC, but there are a lot of other ways to get the vaccine as well. There's a website called vaxfinder.mass.gov where you can find appointments at local clinics or at pharmacies. A lot of places do accept walk-ins. You can figure out where you can get different ones to make sure that it's right for you, or if you've got a child or a teenager who's above 16, that they could get the Pfizer vaccine. If you can't use the internet, you can use the Massachusetts Vaccine Scheduling Line, which is at 211 or at this 877 number. It's pretty easy to get plugged in at one of a variety of community sites to get these vaccines when you feel like you're ready. And there's also some resources for transportation as well that I'll leave here that people can do this on the screen for a minute here. You need access. Mass Health has some resources. The DPH websites, mass.gov, has some resources to get help getting to sites if you need help getting to a place to get a vaccine. And then if you do get to a vaccine, you get a vaccine and then you have side effects afterwards. Clearly, if you have serious kind of side effects, you need to be checked out by a healthcare provider. And if you don't have one, there is a way to report all kinds of reactions through the CDC website, cdc.gov/besafe. You can also get to this on a smartphone to tell the CDC if you're having a problem. And always the emergency room at Newton Wellesley Hospital and other places around town are here to help if you have any kind of serious illness or serious reaction and you need some help urgently. So once you get the vaccine, how long is it going to take to be protected? It takes a few weeks to get full immunity. About 2 weeks after the last dose is when you're immune. For the 1 dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine, it's the fastest. 2 weeks after that, you're considered to be fully vaccinated. The immune system probably gets better and better at fighting it over time as the immune system develops responses. But if you don't get your first vaccine, you won't have any protection. So for those of you out there in the audience who haven't had your first vaccine, I would highly recommend it. And there's just a few other links here and places where you can go to get more. And maybe I'll provide this slide deck to the Watch CDC team, and they can use it for these links and resources as needed as well too. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and be available for any questions.
Thank you so much for that. So we learned a lot of valuable information. We'd also like to extend an invitation to anyone who has not been vaccinated yet to visit our vaccine clinic on October 23rd. But first, we have some very important questions. So the first one being, how long is the vaccine effective for?
So because we've only had a limited amount of time since the vaccines were available, they were first given, I was in the first wave at Newton Wellesley Hospital to get it back at the end of December when they were first available to healthcare providers. And then they were available to patients at high risk, like older patients or immune compromised patients, starting in the late winter and early spring. So we've really only had about 10 months or so to really understand how these vaccines perform in real life. So far, the Pfizer vaccine, there was enough evidence to suggest that 6 months later, certain people should get boosters. And I think there will be more recommendation for boosters later. But the evidence is still that these vaccines are highly effective at preventing serious illness, hospitalization, and death, even 10 or 12 months later. So we'll learn more over time, and there probably will be recommendations for boosters, but that first dose is the most important one, getting it done the first time, and then we'll learn more and have further advice for people when the time comes for boosters later.
So this is actually another good follow-up question to that one. What are the long-term effects of getting the COVID vaccine versus getting COVID-19?
So there really are no known long-term effects of the vaccine at all. So even the kind of serious side effects, I mean, there are extremely rare cases where people had very rare side effects from the vaccine, like blood clots, where there were some bad outcomes, even a handful of deaths, but out of tens of millions of vaccines, very small numbers of bad outcomes like that. That for the average person who gets the vaccine, you might have a day or two of achiness or chills or feeling tired, some soreness at the site. And then after that, you have no idea you even had the vaccine. There are no long-lasting side effects at all, as opposed to COVID-19, where besides the hundreds of thousands of people who have gotten severely ill, there are people who were sick and have had long-lasting symptoms, neurologic symptoms, loss of taste and smell, that there are lots of patients who have had long-term side effects that last for months after getting the infection with COVID-19, but really no long-term consequences of the vaccine whatsoever.
Great, that's good to hear. And if someone has already had COVID, do they benefit from getting vaccinated?
That's a really good question. So the infection itself probably protects you from getting reinfected for some period of time. But the scientists who have studied patients who had COVID-19, for example, people who had it even before a vaccine was available and then got one of the vaccines afterwards, they had even stronger immune system responses than people who never had COVID-19. So as we move into this long-term phase of living with COVID-19 in the community, if you've had COVID-19, there is definitely benefit to getting a vaccine, and there's pretty much no downside to it. There were some initial reports of people who had slightly stronger side effects like fevers or achiness afterwards if they had had COVID-19 before the vaccine. But in general, people who have had COVID-19, got the vaccine, tolerated it very well. And the evidence shows that they have really great protection from getting COVID-19 again.
That's good to hear too. So last question we have, and I think it will be a good ending point for us. What advice would you give someone who is hesitant to get vaccinated?
So I think talking to someone is helpful. I think these kind of forums where we provide information is important, but I think talking to a healthcare provider, talking to other people who had the vaccine can also be helpful to hear about their experiences, and especially talking to people who had some fears or had some hesitancy before they got the vaccine, and hearing how it went, that it goes really well, that there are all kinds of different reasons. Sometimes you need a priest to talk about it. Sometimes you need a doctor. Sometimes you need a friend. I mean, all these people who are in our lives are important parts of moving forward through all parts of our lives, that there's a lot of information out there on the internet that's reliable. There's information out there that's not so reliable. And I think the most reliable information will come from websites associated with the CDC, Mass Department of Public Health, other large healthcare systems. I think that's where you're going to find your most reliable information. Talk to people that it's a safe, effective strategy for preventing something that's really upended all of our lives in ways that we couldn't really even imagine. So if we're going to get through this, we need everyone to work together, do what you need to do to get the information that makes you feel good about getting a vaccine.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Leibowitz.
Welcome. Thank
Again,
you.
I would like to extend all the invitation to anyone who has not been vaccinated yet to our clinic on October 23rd.